Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics on a truly historic day. Oh, and we got the wrong background in there. We'll have to change that one in just a moment. Although my ticker incorrect and outdated aside, actually, let's pull it up here because we had what I think has to be the greatest day in the history of the silver market. And here you can see the correct prices. Actually, it's interesting. You have a little bit of a weird print on the futures, although you see 79.16 on the spot price. And just don't panic, anyone. It's okay. We had a weird print at the end here. It was basically 79.63 for an hour after the market wrapped up, and then something happened on the investing.com feed. So really your true barometer, where did our silver ticker go? Come on, there we go. Spot was up 719, futures up just under $8. And just for a little proof of that, well, we can go here. And tonight we're going to talk about the wild things that have happened in the past 24 hours, as well as I've been thinking about this since last night, what may actually be going on that's driving it, because I think it's safe to say we're in uncharted territory. I did learn a couple of months ago it's not uncharted territory, it's uncharted territory. Little did I know, but here you see this was the way things closed, up $7.94, 11% on the day. Wow, what a 24 hours. So, where to begin? In fact, I think we will start with last night, and if I do this properly, we'll lead into a chain of events. And I'll be the first to say that I think for anyone to say conclusively what's going on would be a bit premature. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant that my information is better, although I did talk with a handful of people who see these things even closer up than I do. And that will be incorporated into tonight's discussions. So, anyway, let us begin, because if we take a look back here at our silver chart, now I know there's a handful of you out there that probably were having an incredibly difficult time making it through Christmas dinner last night, waiting for the markets to resume. And let's just say that when that happened, sure did not disappoint. Let's see if we go back to the 1 week here and get those out of the way. Here we are on Christmas and opens up. We're below $72. This is the futures price we're looking at here. And opens, starts climbing. We see some 73s, some 74s. On a little side note, I was quite fortunate to be playing music in the studio last night, which was a wonderful end to my Christmas. And sitting there, I'll play a song, silver's up $1, play another song, silver's going up another dollar. And I think you'll be able to, some of you at least, will be able to associate with what I'm about to say here. But there was some point around when it hit 74, 75, where it was almost like there's something scary about this. Maybe not anything specifically, but there's in the back of your mind, it's like, geez, are we about to see a rug pull, or is there something else actually going on here that hasn't really come to light yet that is driving this? And unfortunately, that did not happen today. It went quite a bit higher. Although it was interesting, I mentioned to several people, and many of them had the same feeling. Obviously, this is incredible news if you're a silver investor, and I'm not here to try and rain on the parade. Just it was something clued in last night where there's something different going on here. Something that I have not seen. Maybe people saw a little bit in the 1980s, but take a look. Here's our 3 month chart. And there's that, where we go? Back here, November 20th, which I've mentioned a couple times in the past few weeks, where the silver price is at $48. It's now at 79. So 50% of 48 is 24. That would bring us to 72. So when it crossed 72, that meant that silver was up over 50% in the last 5 weeks, little over a month. And any other time since I've been following silver, well, maybe maybe 2011 was similar. Obviously, we didn't get this high, but in the way it was moving, yet there are always pullbacks. And just to see the way this has gone straight up, really, I mean, are minor pullbacks here. It goes from 64 to 61. So a couple minor pullbacks, yet it's just as I was looking at this and watching this, it just felt more and more like I wonder if there's something going on that I don't know about yet, or that other or the market has not figured out about yet. But is there a scramble for silver somewhere that some people do know about and are acting on? So as I was going to sleep last night, that was my mission for today to figure out, talk with some people, figure out what might be going on. And fortunately, I have a thesis that developed throughout the day as we watched this historic rally. And whoops, didn't mean to click on that one, but and I will walk you through what happened. And fortunately, I think I have everything I need here lined up. Hopefully, we'll get these in the right order. Was just got home about an hour ago. Had a nice day seeing a friend down in Miami. We're at a beautiful pool at a Four Seasons and trying to like get in the kept trying to get in the water, but the silver price, talking to a friend when I get out of my car, it's at 77. By the time I get to the pool, it's at 78. I'm like, can I get in there before it hits 79? I got in at 78.95, so I did win. But let's take a step back to this morning because we wake up and for those who don't know, well, we actually have someone who normally helps post Vince's show, but Francis, our superhero, is on well-earned vacation this week. So now I used to do this, and unfortunately, the old man here still knows how to do it. So I'm getting Vince's emails in the morning, and he's sounding like Mark Baum at a mortgage conference, about ready to explode. I'm seeing all over the place $82 silver in China, and then Vince's video a little bit late today. He had some tech issues, but in either case, I tried to find this exact part before I started here. I didn't, but fortunately, I can remember the key gist of it. Because I'm watching the video, and maybe halfway through somewhere in there, he says, this is being caused by a physical issue. This isn't just the speculators. So, right there, I think is an important distinction because look, if you saw what happened in 1980, and especially if you lived through 2011, and may I add, if you lived through 2011 where you had a big option position on before silver hit 50, and if you still had big option position on as silver was coming down from 50, you remember that. Of course, also in 2008, even when things were blowing up in the financial markets and especially with the mortgages, silver ended up at 50 bucks a couple of years later, but Fed was in the midst of an incredible rate cutting campaign, yet silver drops from 21 to 9 while there's a physical shortage. No one can get silver, yet the price gets clobbered. Similarly, you remember we watched silver sit in the teens for a decade of 0% rates and quantitative easing. Yet what happens to silver? It sits in the teens, then finally COVID hits. And we see silver, I think it was up at 19 bucks, then goes down to 12. Although a couple months later, you see it shoot from 12 up to breaks $20 for the first time since 2016, makes it all the way to $29. So you can have a move that goes higher, but as we've seen in commodities, we won't think I spent years discussing my thoughts on what causes some of those plummets. We'll leave that aside, but still, even when there's a bigger move, we've seen the plummets before that. So again, I'm not saying this to worry anyone, just it's something that's always in the back of my mind, knowing that it's possible. And when we go back to what happened last night, I'm thinking that the part of what concerns me is that you do have supply and demand matters over the longer time scale. But as I think I don't have to convince anyone watching here, we have also seen that over the shorter time period, that can be irrelevant, with the best case in point being the deficits, the fact that we were on trajectory for a supply issue. Even forget what happened in October and after that. But prior to that, everything as we watched silver go from the 20s up to the 50s, and we heard, well, there's deficits and everything else I just mentioned. Well, that had existed the year before and the year before that. And one of the things that I think is really tricky, and which I might add, I touched on in the silver report we put out back in September, which if you have not seen it, I do recommend it. Maybe I'm biased. I think there's a lot in there that's helpful, of which one part was really distinguishing why the silver price can do this. Now, if you run a deficit and the price is too low over a long enough period of time, you get what we've just seen happen. But until that happens, we've seen that whether we like it or not, if the Fed says that, we saw it even a couple weeks ago. People thought the Fed wasn't going to cut in December, and you saw the sell-off in the metals. And in fact, I think that was the one sell-off I saw on the chart a moment ago. So, yeah, whether we like it or not, this is priced by what the people watching the Fed and trading futures on the COMEX are doing. That I'm not saying every single one of them, but I would assert that many of those traders know less about the dynamics that are actually going on in the silver market than you do. They're not generally, some do, but a lot of the people they're looking at technicals and other things. So what I'm getting at with this is that if this rally were happening and being driven primarily by the speculation or hot money that's coming in, and we've talked about, and all of us have waited for years where, hey, if the mainstream ever piles into this and you have hot money floating around, then things could get pretty wild. Yet if it's that type of money, has a tendency to change quickly. And if that were what was driving this, let's say that would leave me on the more concerned side that maybe we could wake up and silver's down some big amount one day, perhaps similar to 2011. Yet going back to what Vince said earlier this morning, where he said, I wish I had been able to find it. If you have not seen this video, I'd recommend watching it certainly. But when he said this is a physical issue, this is not the speculators. I'm thinking, oh, well, that's interesting to hear him saying. And I mean, he seemed rather certain about it. Now, I don't like to sit there and think, all right, well, just because Vince says something means that it must be so. Obviously, Vince is brilliant. I'm grateful to have him here. We all love Vince, but he's not God. So, but then as I'm thinking about it, well, we're also not flying blind here either, because maybe that's his opinion, but here's a damn good piece of evidence. Because if the silver price in China, where the majority of the industrial demand is, has gapped up, that shows you that something is happening. Now, maybe that doesn't distinguish definitively between whether it's speculators or whether there's a physical issue, but, and again, I'll preface much of what I'm about to lay out is not a conclusive proof. You need a little bit more evidence, although, as I've talked, someone well connected inside the bullion banking industry, amongst others. Everyone that I've discussed this with, including Vince, let's say it's like, well, you maybe don't have enough evidence to get a conviction, but like where you can see that there's a lot of smoke coming out of the building. Maybe someone's barbecuing back there, but you might at least want to check it out. So there's, and I'll say that it's too early to know conclusively what happened, yet there are some rather a series of what would have to be wild coincidences, I might go as far as to say, of which, all right, we got silver. I think this was when, and yeah, here he mentioned silver was 75 bucks in the US while it was 82 in China. So if all of a sudden we have a $7 premium in China, that indicates something is going on with a good chance that it could be more physical in nature. Now, where have we seen changes in the price of silver in different markets? Well, you don't have to go that far back because we saw 2 months ago in October when the London price, which the spot price normally trades lower than the futures in a normalized market, if you get into what's backwardation where the spot price goes over that, usually an indication something's off. And we saw the London price at one point shoot as high as $3 over spot, which myself, but several others, including Bloomberg, say call a breakage in the silver market. And I think that's reasonable. Now, here's where it gets interesting and fun. Because, all right, this is certainly interesting and certainly wouldn't refute what Vince was saying. But then I'm thinking about it a little more. And if you recall, you have the silver shortage in London caused by a lot of things, but let's say the final spark was what happened in India, where they went to an overt shortage, had to halt new additions into their ETFs because they didn't have silver. So you have this combination and essentially ended up with a shortage in London and in India, not necessarily elsewhere, but what happens because the London spot price goes up. And this is a concept I would don't want to say pay attention. Hopefully you're paying attention, although I think this is relevant in that you may be seeing more of this. In fact, we're seeing it now where when you have I would not say that we have a global silver shortage because you can look in the COMEX and there's still plenty of silver there. But once again, we're seeing one market where I can't say conclusively shortage in China, but as you'll see, why I think there's a lot of evidence suggesting that something of that nature might be the case, of which the price, similar to how we saw the London price go up and metal was drawn back there. So here we have this spread. And all of a sudden, it's reminding me of something that didn't just happen yesterday, but after London had their issue, you saw silver go from the COMEX over to London, and you saw silver come from China over to London. All right, seems good enough. Now, did enough silver go to London? I have this one here. Here is Robert Gottlieb, former precious metals managing director at JP Morgan. And here he is back on October 23rd saying, London needs 100 to 150 million ounces. There we go. Gottlieb put a shocking number. I believe we need another 100 to 150 million ounces physically in London for the market to normalize. Now, they ended up getting about 80. And to put further context on this, going back to the man who forecast the silver squeeze back in January, Daniel Galley of TD Securities, I think this will help put things in context. Wrote his update, declining inventories. He mentioned how LBMA vaults could reach the critical values necessary to disrupt trading behaviors sooner than expected. With only 305 million ounces remaining in the LBMA's free float as of December, the world's largest stockpile is nearing critical thresholds that could disrupt silver's market structure. Okay, 305 million ounces sound like a lot. Sounds like a lot. How do we know that's too low? Explains right here. After all, 250 million ounces of silver have been required on average for trading on any given day over the last 5 years. And in case you would like to see what that looks like, here's the LBMA's site. If you go to pricing and data up here, you can find this. And here's daily turnover has been higher than the 250 million ounces. Here's 250, now it's 300. But to put that in context, basically, if the free float goes under the daily turnover, that's when Daniel, who again, I might add, he's not just some dude. He works for TD and he wrote this paper and really nailed it back in January. So if free float goes below daily turnover, that's his indication of a problem, which I would agree with. And here's the only problem with the alleged resolution in London is that I think they got down to about 120 or 140 million ounces and they added 80. So that's 200, 220, which would still be below the 250, let alone the 300. And some of you have heard me say this before, but I went to the Silver Institute dinner in New York last month in November. And Philip Newman, who does the numbers for Metals Focus and which becomes the Silver Institute's report, he gave a presentation, took some questions, and my question I asked there was that, okay, with this metal that's come back over, do you think this is a temporary band-aid or has the problem been resolved? I didn't talk to every single person in that room, but Philip, nor anyone else I talked to, was willing to say, like, yeah, I'd bet the ranch on this being a permanent resolution. So, hey, you left a problem there, and if you want to see where that stands now, so let's just mention that London is not out of trouble just yet. Here's our fleet free float, the part in green here. You can see that 6,071 tons, which, according to my calculator, comes out to 214 million ounces in the free float. So 214 million ounces. He was concerned when we had 305 that it was going to drop below 250. Obviously, 214 is well below 250. And as I mentioned here, maybe you might want to say, at least as of the last, let's see how this looks. Oh, no, that's the last year. So since September, they had 346 million ounces, October 295. So we're even further below that, indicating that London's issue has not been resolved yet. What happened as that metal was coming over? And this wasn't just yesterday. Here we go back on November 10th. Gold and silver surge again. Well, China's silver supply is getting drained. So now we're not just talking about, well, for some reason the premium jumped in unprecedented fashion in China, $7 over spot. But this was happening in the context of issues that have been going on over a month and concerns. Here, there you go. Here's the chart of the Chinese stockpiles. You can see here we are back in 2021. It's fallen quite precipitously. Then in particular, you have this gap down here where it gets down to that was 1453 back in October 31st. Here's Bai Jiajun in China mentioning vaults of the Shanghai Futures Exchange. I'm sure he meant hit a new low. I'm guessing they didn't bite the new low. And I suppose I don't have it in here, but I remember Bloomberg reported on it a couple of times. So now we're talking about a market where the premium jumped, where we already knew that there were supply concerns. So I'm thinking, okay, well, that changes things a little bit there. And here is the updated. You can see actually a little spike came back in. So there's some metal there. But again, to what Vince is saying, this is more of a physical issue than speculators. Perhaps the key nuance there, as I was thinking this through, is that I would be less concerned about a rug pull if whatever is causing this rally, if it's a physical issue, that's harder to resolve versus, the COMEX traders, maybe they change their mind the next day. But, now I'm starting to see the evidence mount that we may have a physical issue and just checking my notes here. So I get this all lined up. Then what else do we see come up? And let's see where we have this one. I'll see if I can find it. But basically, you had, where did he put this? You had a Chinese fund in one of these tabs, but it was the UBS fund that issued a warning about volatility a couple of weeks ago. And you have too many tabs open. Oh, there we go. All right, I found it. China Specialist Silver Fund closes to new capital as prices peak. So they had a fund invested in silver. Remember, how do these funds make their money? By fees. So theoretically, if you have the market moving like this and people are piling money in, more money that goes in, the more fees they get. They should be thrilled. Yet here they are closing the fund to new additions. Silver trading in China intensified after the country's only pure silver fund closed its Class C shares to new money following a surge in retail demand. Well, that would certainly support this being more of a physical issue than just speculators pushing the price up. China moved to block fresh money from its only pure silver fund after a violent surge pushed prices beyond the value of the metal it holds. And this was the fund, it's a UBS fund. And then as I'm thinking all this through, I'm like, wait a second. That sounds familiar. Where else did we recently hear this? And I asked this one to Vince when I talked to him on my way back from Miami, and he was like, "Wait, don't tell me, don't tell me." And I'm like, "Vince, I'm not going to tell you because if I told you before you got it, you would be upset." And actually, I'll give everybody in the audience, if anyone wants to put their guess in the chat box of what this reminds you of. Well, coming back full circle, and let's see where we have this one. What happened the day before the silver market broke on October 9th? Oh, come on. There we go. October 9th. I believe this happened. The 8th was reported the 9th. 8th, 9th is not a big difference here. India's Kotak Mahindra halts new investments in silver ETF amid shortage. So you got the elevated premium, you got the fund that's shut down, you have the fact that there were already known supply issues, and you can see them for yourself there. And then you have an ETF refusing new additions, which is the exact same thing that happened in India right as they had a shortage. So again, there's smoke coming out of the back of the building, and maybe someone's just left his hot dogs on too long. But in terms of what is going on here, where I may maintain my belief just by the fact that we've never seen this before in history. Okay, where's my tweet? Yeah, there you go. That one's better. Closer to $8. Yeah. Prices moved more than the screw the spot price. Futures are up higher. So you've had a run that I've never seen before without a pullback. I maybe there's something I don't think maybe in 1980 there were a couple days similar to this, but you have the premium shooting up in China, and you have Vince calling right now while we're live on the air. Let's see. We'll ask Vince. Do you want to log on and join us? So maybe we will have Vince hop on here in a second. Who knows if he's watching at home? I did tell him we were doing this, but again, to recap, you have the premium jumping. I mean, we've seen Shanghai premiums go over New York before by about $3, but this one, quite a jump. You have the fact there was already a known supply issue. You have the fund shutting down. And I think there was one more bullet. I'm forgetting exactly what, but I've said it enough times. So, can you say conclusively what's happening? I don't know. Maybe you could. I would say it's like if it were a court case. I don't know if you have enough evidence to convict, but certainly what it looks like. And all right, Vince is in bed, so he's sleeping now. He won't be joining us, but I'm sure we'll be hearing plenty from him next week about it. So, historic day, and in terms of what's causing something that we have not seen before, these are at least some data points that I think are pretty relevant. And hopefully that puts this in context of what we could be looking at here. What happens next? Your price could be up or down a lot on Sunday night. Jake, I hope you're behaving yourself, not driving your wife crazy, watching too many silver videos until then. I'm sure there's a few others out there. And anyway, again, I'll mention that I've laid this thesis to several people today that I think are quite accomplished. And I think they were all in agreement where it's like, well, There's still some unknown information, but sure seems to be lining up here. So that said, I'm gonna make sure we cover. I think I got through pretty much everything. If people have questions, geez, it's already 11 o'clock, so why not stay up a little later? We'll take a few questions, but I want to make sure there's a few things. Here's another one. So this rally really accelerated beginning back in August. I believe it was the 18th where it really things really picked up. And dollar index 98,415 then down a bit in the last week or so. But I mean this isn't being driven by a fall in the dollar. At least the dollar index, I understand it's measuring against other shitty currencies, yet there is normally a correlation. A lot of the times dollar index goes down, you would have a big day up in the metals. But over these past couple months, now we certainly had plenty of decline in the dollar index the first half of the year, but you see here from August, it's basically been flat. And here is the silver price from, you can see it here. Get out of there, box. So here, August, silver is at 36 bucks. It's been soaring ever since then. Makes you kind of wonder what happens when the dollar index starts going down, which basically everyone the Trump administration has promised. Might we add, for those of you who had not seen it, Trump was out a couple of weeks ago. Someone asked him how low he wants interest rates. He said 1% or lower would fit. You have the Fed futures pricing in two rate cuts next year, getting us down to three or three and a quarter. So if they're really going to cut rates to 1% next year, or maybe they don't go as far as Trump wants, although he did say he thinks the new Fed chairman should consult him. But I mean, you have silver now at basically $80. I'm marking it the 79. That's my considering the closing price here. Someone wants to disagree, you can use whatever makes floats your boat, but this is where it was sitting for an hour or so before that weird print. So not only is Trump talking about rates far lower, but here's the thing. What really moves markets? Not, if everyone knows, well, there's going to be a 25 basis point rate cut. Usually it's priced in. But if the market's saying rates are going to be here and Trump's saying they're going to be like underneath your basement, that means we haven't had that reaction yet, which I'm in some ways baffled by because I mean he's telegraphed it and I don't see why Wall Street's having such a hard time connecting that. But so in either case, you have this before the dollar index has gone lower, which Myron, who was the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, wrote his 41-page thesis on how to restructure the global trading system. And basically, if you wanted his answer, it was to lower the dollar. Now he's a part of the Fed before Trump's guy comes in. So they're going to get the dollar lower. I think that part you can safely count on. And if they're going to get the dollar substantially lower than, or rates substantially lower than the market has priced in, that will drive the dollar lower. But it's not like it'd be different if they were doing that and that drove silver to 80 bucks. They haven't even, well, they could make the argument that they did plenty of that earlier this year. Although I think they still have quite a ways to go, where if they don't want the US to be dependent on China to build weapons, if they want to go to war to China, which is, you can see the paradox in that equation, the dollar index is going to have to be a lot lower. And that's going to happen after silver is $80. So you can, for anyone who's on the East Coast and getting ready for bed soon, you can dream about that tonight. Like, what happens when Trump gets his new pick in there? But anyway, we covered that one. Again, if you need more coverage, this is on the front of our page. I'd recommend you check that out if you have not seen it. We talked about the supply issues in China. There's the turnover. There's Robert Gottlieb saying 100 to 150 million ounces. There's Daniel Galley saying why that's a problem. The turnover, that's the fund being shut down. Here is India. Again, that was the last part when I'm like, wait a second, a fund, because it was like I was focusing on the first two parts, and then it's like clicking by the second. I'm like, we've seen that before. And the last time it happened, things got really wild. Now it could be happening again. I don't know. Maybe China has a pallet of silver coming in. Doesn't look or sound ideal at this point. Few other notes before we wrap up. In fact, I shouldn't have said we are closing up that early because there's still a couple shockers in here. Here is the Silver Institute's mid-year report. And just going to check quickly. All right, we're still coming through live. And I know people were disappointed. Well, there's more solar, but how come the demand numbers are down? Because we look at the market balance here, the deficits back in 2021, when by one accounting metric they began 89, 272, 210, 151. And again, I know there are some out there who think that whatever solar numbers the Silver Institute puts out are just wrong and incorrect. I did not agree with that. And one of the key components is that even though you have had solar capacity installations go up this year, this isn't just Silver Institute's opinion. You can read plenty that there have been massive thrifting efforts going on. So, that aside, you look and you see the number 95, it seems like, yeah, the deficit's getting smaller and going away. And certainly if the deficits went away, that would be something that could be substantial. Yet they break these numbers out in a couple of different ways. Here's if you include the ETFs. Then your deficit actually began in 2019 to 72, 286, 154, 154, 173, 213. And if you include what's going into the ETFs, you just had a record deficit rather than a reduction. Now, again, I'm glad they break these numbers out here because depending on what specifically I'm trying to find out, there's a right time and place for each of these. Yet, and again, you could say, well, is the money metal that goes into the ETFs, you want to call it more speculative or hot money, or I mean, I would call institutional more than anything else. And they can change their minds. Whereas, I know Jeff Christian, counts supply and demand deficit with excluding even the net physical investment because at least the way he looks at it, and there's different thoughts on that is fine. We'll leave that aside. But he's comparing just industrial usage versus what's mined because the part that goes into investment or is sold as coins and bars is still out there. I don't think any of them are wrong. They're going to give you different data points, but here's the thing. A, remember that this is all happening with historic levels of retail selling. Now, I have not seen any change in that yet. In fact, had a dinner with some bullion dealers on Tuesday, and they are still seeing it. They didn't see this yet, although this happened quickly. I wonder if the price up at 80 bucks, does that bring another segment of sellers in? Maybe, but here's the thing. In either case, the price has soared while that's going on. If, and I would say when, at some point those sellers turn into buyers, that's going to eat into the supply. But back to this ETF number, you could say like, well, they could change, and that's fair enough. But here, if we look at this, which came out November 13th, and then we look at the ETF holdings. So let us go down here. We'll take 6 months. So here's mid-November. And typically is not always going to be the case, but you can imagine if the price is going up, you're usually going to have metal coming in. If the price is going down, usually there's metal leaving. There are deviations to that, but here's mid-November, and you see the majority of the metal has come in. Or if you look at this blue line, gray line here is the price, blue line, millions of ounces of silver in the ETFs, and here's mid-November. We're at 1290-ish, let's call that, and now 1360. So since where did we go here? All right, so they have 200 million ounces as of November 13th, and you just had another 70 million ounces go in. So that means that if you did this now, this would be 365 million. Be fascinating to see what happens in the last week of the year. For anyone who's wondering what's happening in gold, similar picture. You saw a couple withdrawals there. Let's make sure we are on the right one. 6 months, but you can see since mid-November, beginning of November. Here again, you see the blue line is going up, which is what you would traditionally expect in terms of those flows. And last one I will mention, this was sent to me just before we started. Interesting. I know people always wonder, well, doesn't Elon Musk do this or that? Here is a bigger deal than it may seem. China restricts silver exports, breaking silver price. Elon Musk saying this is not good. Silver is needed in many industrial processes. So he had an event so big that it even caught Elon's attention today. I'm not saying that will mean this or that, but heck of a lot happening out there. And if I may add one other special note here, how fitting, as I mentioned this the other day, but on this historic day in the silver market, I finally received my first, let's see if we can get that up there. I'll put my hand behind it. My first Arcadia silver bar. What I showed the other day was from our silver bar maker, but 10 ounces. Here is the back of it. And it's funny, I've been checking the post tracking number. Thought it was going to be here on Wednesday. Then this morning, I was seeing it was still, ironically, it was in Miami. And I'm like, I should go to the post office there, but I figured I'll just wait. See the notice, it's delivered right before I about to leave. So I go grab the box, go right in my car. Fortunately, my silver maker is good. He packed it tight, and I don't have a regular key for my car. I have one of those thingies you stick in there. So I'm trying to like slice this thing open with my mailbox key, end up taking it down to Miami. And it was just kind of nice and special that on such a historic day to have one of these and be able to hold it. So I know we have a couple people who asked how to get one. I just finally got mine tonight. And in the next week or so, I'm going to figure out all the mechanics around starting to get them out. If you are interested, you can email me at chris@arcadiaeconomics.com. And sorry, they're more expensive. We actually started working on this a couple of months ago, but anyway, the price is what it is. And just to not freak anyone out before we wrap up, I will put back our true, what I would consider the where the futures closed today at 79.62. And for however long you've been following this, I know some people don't celebrate Christmas, that's fine, but what a stunning Christmas gift. I mean, it's like it got to that point last night where it's like goes up another dollar, like starts to lose meaning. I'm like, well, I guess this is good. 74, 75, 76. It was also nice to talk with a couple people today who expressed to like, you wouldn't believe how much money I made today. When I know the stocks didn't have a big day. That's the last thing I'm worried about. Silver price stays here. Wait till the earnings start coming out. So, and whether you think, I know, and not just if you think, it makes sense that if you had a day like this, you'd expect the stocks to be up a lot. It just doesn't always work like that. It's not always linear, but there will be days in the next weeks and months where silver's sitting there and then stocks are up 5 or 10%. So I know people are a little upset about that. And, but don't be upset about anything tonight. Just sit here and see. I mean, this is beyond all the years I've been studying silver and talking about when I thought like what could happen. I never dreamed of experiencing what we've just experienced. If I can pick my favorite part, I sure appreciate each and every one of you who've been part of this channel for so long, and just to know that the people who have been part of it are getting rewarded. Then don't worry about if your neighbor made this much and you made less than that. Or even if you don't have silver and you're just watching this, but certainly if you do, that's been my favorite part, knowing that something that I remember before ramping up this channel, I was like, shit, I guess if I'm going at it this aggressively and end up being wrong, it's like, I don't know. I guess at some point, maybe if I completely missed it, I guess you'd put your name out there like that, and maybe it's not this cut and dry, but thinking, well, like you shouldn't continue giving advice about markets. So I mean, for me, it was certainly something that at least in my own mind, felt there was a lot on the line, and to see this and play out in such stunning fashion and know that at least there's some people that it's impacted their lives and had a great difference. Just knowing that it's been a success for people. Getting a little touched and choked up here, but thank you all for being a part of this. I hope you've had a wonderful holiday. Hopefully this video, I've been talking for a while here. Sometimes maybe I go a run-on sentence, but hopefully this helped put into context what could well be happening. And geez, if you have a supply disruption, if this should get exacerbated or worsen, I don't know, maybe some of the silver price targets I hear being thrown out there would sound a little big and would require something like that happen. Um, I would give this word of caution, like be prepared. You're going to see wild volatility. I still think we're going to see it in both directions at some point. But man, I mean, if $80 silver isn't good enough for you yet, the concept that we're seeing it within this given environment and these conditions. But we'll get to that in 2026, or maybe we'll get to that on the Sunday night open. Hopefully, you guys sleep a little bit before then, and hopefully, this was helpful. And guess we'll wrap up there for now. But just Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. I think today was Kwanzaa too. Got an email alert about that somewhere, but I hope you're just enjoying and appreciating that we get to see some history be made. And certainly with the amount of time so many of you have time, money, energy, effort, frustration that we've all invested into this. Wow, sure seems like the it's turned out to all be worth it. So anyway, it's getting late here, so have a good night. Thank you for being here with me. Go out, celebrate, give someone a hug, and we'll see you again soon. Something wild happens over the weekend, I'll check back in. But otherwise, we will see you next week and have a beautiful night, my silver friends.